Hello everyone, my name is Kanushri. Before we dive into our AP Microeconomics Masterclass, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to the organization making this session count. Let's Unbound is dedicated to empowering students across more than 25 countries by fostering STEM skills, life skills, and college readiness. Our mission is to help students achieve their life skills by 18 and life goals by 35 through personalized learning and mentorship. With programs ranging from skill development, gifted test, college prep, to Ivy League readiness, Let's Unbound has taught over 4,000 students, conducted more than 120,000 hours of teaching, earned a global 4.9 out of 5 rating. By combining innovative teaching methods with strong mentorship, Let's Unbound helps students realize their potential and make a positive impact on the world. So as we begin today's masterclass, remember, you're building skills that will help you excel far beyond the in college, career, and in life. Over to you, Harsh.
Thank you, Kanushri. Welcome all of you to this session. Today we will be talking about the AP Microeconomics. Okay, I am Harshvardhan Pathak on behalf of Let Us Unbound. I welcome you all to this particular session on AP Microeconomics. Okay, let's get started now. AP Microeconomics is a college level course that introduces students to the principles of economics that apply to the functions of individual economic decision makers. Now, when I say individual decision makers, I am referring to the individuals who are working in the industry. Okay. The course also develops students' familiarity with the operation of product and factor markets. So, exposure to different types of markets that we discuss in economics, distribution of income, market failure, and the role of government in promoting greater efficiency and equity in the economy. So it's a overall exposure to economics in particular, but the special area of focus is obviously the individual economic decision makers. So we are talking at a firm level, we're talking at people who are responsible to take those decisions at the level of firm. Students learn to use graphs, charts, and data to analyze, describe, and explain economic concepts. Now, this is the major area of thrust as far as the microeconomics curriculum is concerned. You get exposure to different types of graphs wherein you study relationships between different economic quantities, try to understand different concepts which are based on those graphs, try to predict the behavior of certain economic quantities based on those graphs and charts. Okay. College course equivalence. So the AP Microeconomics is equivalent to a 1-semester introductory college course in economics. So as far as your credits are concerned, if you have a good grade over the AP Microeconomics examination, it would be considered as a 1-semester college course in the US. Prerequisites, there are no prerequisites. That is the best part of this course. Okay, students should be able to read a college level textbook, possess basic mathematics and graphing skills. Now, when I talk of what graphing skills or what basic mathematics skills we are talking about, so concepts related to area under the curve, concepts related to finding the slope of the graph, how is a slope related to the variables presented on the graph, all those basic mathematical concepts are what they are checking out. Students who are interested in economics, business, marketing, finance, or public policy, these are the specializations that this particular AP targets. Okay, it is a strong fit for students who are interested in decision making of individual consumers and firms. Okay, so the microeconomics AP is particularly, as I pointed out earlier as well, is focused more on the theory of consumers and the theory of firms, market structures, and obviously the role of government in controlling these markets. Okay. Future economists and business majors. So if your aim is to opt for business major courses or economics major courses, then obviously this AP would be something that you should take or you must take. Students pursuing economics, business administration, marketing, finance, entrepreneurship majors would highly benefit from taking up this particular AP, as it will provide the foundational knowledge for the subjects of economics that you are going to study as part of your major curriculum in these areas. Okay. Aspiring public policy makers. So AP Microeconomics would play a major role in terms of public policy making as well. Again, a sub branch of economics, understanding market structures and understanding the government's role at a microeconomic level are the primary focus areas. Okay. Graph and math enthusiasts, sorry. So the course requires a thorough understanding of concepts like supply and demand, the graphs between supply and demand, and it involves calculations which are based on analysis and graph-based analysis in particular, making it a good fit for students who are good at these areas. Okay. Students interested in individual decision making as far as economics is concerned. Again, microeconomics focuses how individual consumers, firms, and markets make decisions, which is different from the broader scope of macroeconomics. Macroeconomics, it would be more about you can say national economy, government initiatives, unemployment, all those things. But microeconomics, more interested at a firm level. Okay, so competition, firms, supply, demand, how markets are functioning, all of that would be covered in microeconomics. Those seeking a college level foundation, so this course prepares students for college level economic courses, and a strong score on the AP exam will obviously earn college credits for you. Talking about the physicals of this test, this is the curriculum. As you can see, the entire syllabus has been divided into 5 portions. Okay, unit 1 talks about the basic economic concepts, and the exam weightage for this particular unit is about 12 to 15%. Unit 2 deals with the fundamental concept of demand and supply. So theory of demand, theory of supply, finding market equilibrium, etc. All of that is covered in unit number 2. The exam weighting is, you can see, around 20 to 25%, and combined it together with the basic concepts, you would see that this is almost 40% of your test. Then unit number 3 is based on production, cost, and perfect competition model. Okay, so what is a perfectly competitive market? What are the features of a perfectly competitive market? What is production, factors of production? All of that is considered in unit number 3. The exam weightage is almost 22 to 25%. Unit number 4 talks about the imperfect competition. Okay, so concepts such as monopoly, oligopoly, all of that is covered in unit number 4, which is about imperfect competition. Unit number 5 focuses on factor markets. Okay, so concepts such as labor, okay, etc. are all discussed as part of unit number 5. The examination weightage is 10 to 13%. So overall, it's not that big a syllabus. Okay, there are only 5 units, and approximately the units have around 20% of weightage, give or take 2 or 3% here and there. Okay, so if I talk in terms of the examination and the syllabus to be covered, this is relatively an easier AP, but the scoring on this AP is usually on the higher side. So you need a very good score to get a good grade on this AP. Talking about the structure of this test, so there are 2 sections on this test. The first section is the MCQ, or the multiple choice type questions. So as part of the multiple choice type questions, you have to answer 60 questions in section number 1, and for that you get 70 minutes. Okay, so the only constraint maybe that you are facing in section 1 is that of time. Attempting 60 questions in 70 minutes is a bit of challenge. So managing time becomes the primary concern as far as section 1 of this test is concerned. Section 2 is a free response section where you are supposed to explain the graphs that we were talking about in detail. You are supposed to write explanatory answers based on those graphs. You are even supposed to draw graphs in most of the questions. You get 60 minutes for your section 2. Okay, and there are total of 3 questions on that particular section. Question 1 being a long question where where you have 10 points, whereas question 2 and 3 are two short questions, 5 points each. Okay, so all in all, 3 questions on the FRQ section, 1 hour, but MCQs, there are 60 questions and you get 70 minutes. So that is the breakup of the two sections. And if I talk in terms of the preparation which is required, both the sections require a very different type of preparation. Okay, attempting a multiple choice type question is very different from attempting a free response question. So as far as your FRQs are concerned, your fundamental knowledge, okay, is definitely tested with these type of questions. As I've already mentioned, you must be able to draw graphs, explain concepts based on graphs, write your explanations as part of the free response questions. The calculator policy, a 4-function scientific or graphing calculator is allowed throughout the examination. So there are certain questions which are numeric in nature. So problem solving part is taken care of if you are good at using your calculator. In fact, most of the questions you would require a calculator because of the figures or the magnitude of calculations involved with those questions. Okay, so a calculator is allowed throughout the test. Now, certain miscellaneous information about this particular paper, if I can talk about these things. So this is very typical of this particular AP, okay, that you must be very good at drawing and analyzing graphs and visuals. Okay. Students should be able to answer questions about a provided graph or visual of or related to each of the following models that I have mentioned here. Both in MCQs as well as in FRQs. Obviously, in FRQs, you would be supposed to draw the graphs as well. MCQs, there would be graphs already which you would have to interpret related to the question which has been asked. Okay, so you can see all the major concept here, they involve graphical representation of quantities. So for example, the production possibility curve, okay, the utility model, the demand and supply curves, the production function, the perfect competition model, the perfectly competitive market and a firm operating in that market, monopolistic competition, so imperfect competition as well, natural monopoly, factor markets like, as I said, the labor and all other factor markets, firms, how they are operating in a perfectly competitive factor market, the concept of monopsony or externalities as far as perfectly competitive markets are concerned, like for example, role of government, etc. Total costs in short run, Lorentz curve. Okay, all of those graphical concepts are very, very important. In fact, if I can go on and say that more than 50% of your paper is graphical in nature. So that ways, your understanding of all the graphical concepts, your proficiency in drawing those graphs, your proficiency in interpretation of those graphs would be the most important skill if you want to get a good grade on this AP microeconomics test. Okay, now I will go on further and discuss certain sample questions so that you get a better idea as to what kind of questions are there on this test. Should help you to understand that how are you going to prepare or what kind of preparation is required as far as the AP microeconomics test is concerned. Okay, so few of the MCQs here, okay, just sample ones so that you get an idea. So most of the questions on the MCQ, you can see that they are trying to test your fundamental knowledge. Okay, for example, here you can see individuals and societies must make choices regarding which goods and services will be produced and consumed. Okay, so obviously it's a question of making a choice. Now, when we are talking about making a choice, the question says, why do we have to make a choice? So obviously, we have to make a choice because there are insufficient resources, correct? So the optimum utilization of resources and satisfying the wants of the people is the primary idea that we study in economics. In fact, the very fundamental concept, first concept that you study is that of insufficient resources and unlimited wants, and how to find the optimum between the two. So the correct answer here is option number B, that why do we have to make choices? Because resources are insufficient to satisfy the unlimited wants of the people. Another question, now you can see immediately there is a question on graph. Okay, so the graph above shows the marginal benefit that a student receives and the marginal cost the student incurs from additional hours of study. Which of the following is true? Okay, so if we go option by option here, first option says beyond S2 hours of study there is no further benefit, which is not correct. We can clearly see even beyond S2 there is some benefit. Okay, although the marginal benefit you can see is coming down. At S1 hours of study, the extra marginal cost of study time exceeds no, it is just the opposite. The optimal number of hours that the student should study is S2 hours. Okay, so that obviously is the correct concept. That is the equilibrium. You can see where marginal cost is equal to marginal benefit. So that point obviously is S2 hours. And that actually is the correct answer to this particular question. Okay, all right. Another one here, which of the following occurs if the price of oranges is below the equilibrium price? Now, this question is from the concept of supply versus demand. Okay, and we know that at equilibrium prices, the quantity supplied and quantity demanded is same. Okay, so that is the equilibrium price. Now, here it is saying that the prices of oranges, they are below the equilibrium price. Okay, so obviously if the prices are running below the equilibrium, then we can clearly see that the quantity sorry, we can clearly see that the quantity purchased of orange or quantity demanded of oranges is actually greater than the quantity supplied, because at a price lower than equilibrium, people will demand more. Obviously, they are getting it cheap, and the suppliers will supply less because they don't want to supply at a price which is lower than the equilibrium price. So the correct option here is option E. Next, total economic surplus will be maximized at which of the following prices and quantity combinations? Okay, so total economic surplus maximization, where would it actually happen? So we can clearly see that the correct answer here is P2 and Q2, where the demand and supply curves intersect each other. So P2 and Q2 are those points where the total economic surplus will be maximized. Moving on, another question here, okay, which is based on the same graph. So we can see that suppose the government sets a price floor at P3 in the market. So the resulting consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight losses will be which of the following? Okay, so if the government sets up a floor price at P3, okay, so we can clearly see that your consumer surplus would be greatly reduced from the equilibrium. It will now only be the area A. Areas B, C, and D will become the producer surplus. So basically the ABCD is the total surplus, and E and F will now contribute to your deadweight losses. So the correct answer to this particular question is option E. Moving on, assume that a 2% increase in the price of Bologna causes a 5% decrease in the quantity demand of cheese. So what is the cross price elasticity of the demand between these goods, and how are these goods related? Okay, so we can see that the cross price elasticity refers to a change in one commodity, okay, and then a corresponding change in the other commodity because of that. So cross price elasticity of demand here is the ratio of 5 to 2, which is 2.5, and because the change is happening in opposite directions, there is an increase in one and causing a decrease in the other. So it is negative 2.5. and these goods are obviously complementary goods. So the correct answer here is option C. For a firm where labor is the only variable input, which of the following happens when diminishing returns set in? Okay, so remember the concept of diminishing return, that the returns are there, but they are now at a decreasing rate. Okay, so if we are talking from a firm's perspective where labor is the only variable input, then obviously your marginal costs will begin to rise when the diminishing returns will set in. Okay, so the correct answer here is D, marginal costs begin to increase. Which of the following indicates the presence of economies of scale as the quantity of output increases? Okay, so when we are talking of economies of scale, we are obviously referring to long run average total cost. And if it indicates the presence of economies of scale with an increase in the quantity of output, so the long run average total cost must decrease. The correct answer here is option B. For a perfectly competitive firm, assume the price equals a rising marginal cost at 200 units of output. So at this output, average total cost is $8 and average variable cost is $5. If the price is $4, by how much can this firm reduce its losses by shutting down? Okay, so if you will do, this is a numerical question, as you can see. Okay, so if you will do your calculations here, the correct answer will work out to be D, $200. All right, now which of the following is true for a completely or a perfectly competitive firm? Okay, so now we are moving to another unit here, theory of firms, and we are talking about perfect competition here. So which of the following is true for a perfectly competitive firm? So a perfectly competitive firm is always a price taker. It is always a price taker. Therefore, the correct answer is option A itself. Which of the following is more likely to occur when there are high barriers to entry in an industry? Okay, so when there are high barriers to entry, the option says the firms in the industry earn economic profits in the long run. In fact, that is actually the right answer, that high barriers will lead to profits, but in a long run. So correct answer again is A. As we can see, industry will be characterized by diseconomies. That is actually wrong. There will be economies of scale. Firm in the industry are price taker. Sorry, that is also not correct. So the correct option obviously is A, that firms in the industry, they will earn economic profits in the long run. Again, you see one more question for this particular AP test. What are the profit and revenue maximizing quantities for the monopolist whose revenue and cost conditions are described by the graph above? Okay, so we can see that if the graph here, there are two conditions that we need to judge. Okay, one is profit maximization. Okay, so where is the profit maximization point that is happening? So profit and revenue maximizing quantities for the monopolist. So profit and revenue maximization, oh, this is the options are not correct. In fact, profit maximization obviously will happen at Q1 and revenue maximization will happen at Q3. So option E here is actually the right answer. In long run equilibrium, at which of the following output levels will a monopolistically competitive firm operate? Okay, so a monopolistically competitive firm will operate where price will equal the average total cost. Again, a very fundamental concept directly being checked in the form of an MCQ. So that would be option C. Okay, the equilibrium quantity of labor used in the production of a good will be the largest under which of the following conditions. So option A says labor market is monopsonistic. That is not correct. When the labor market is monopsonistic, output is pure monopoly. That is also not correct. When the labor market is perfectly competitive and output market is pure monopoly, that is only partially correct. So I will not go with that option. It says when both the labor and output markets are perfectly competitive, that is actually the right answer. Okay, so the equilibrium quantity of labor used in production will be the largest when both labor and output markets are perfectly competitive. Which of the following is true if the production of a good imposes external costs? Okay, so once again, if we read option by option, the correct answer here is option D. A competitive market would produce more than the socially optimal amount. So these are few of the multiple choice questions that you are likely to see, like the pattern of the questions you're likely to see on the test. Then you also have free response questions. Okay, so let's take a look at a sample free response question as well. So for example, you see a free response question typically would have 4 to 5 parts which you would have to answer, and most of the parts you would also have to draw the graphs as I was mentioning earlier. So it says on the island of Gratin, potatoes are produced in a perfectly competitive constant cost industry. The market for potatoes is currently in long run equilibrium at the market price of $5 per sack. So question A, immediately you see they are asking you to draw a graph. So draw a correctly labeled side-by-side graph for potato market and for farmer Lamo. Show each of the following. So you have to show the market equilibrium quantity and price, okay, labeled QMQ, MQM, $5 respectively. The quantity produced and the price for farmer Lamo, again labeling the same. So when you will draw this equilibrium curve, basically you have to draw a supply line which has a positive slope. You have to draw a demand curve which has a negative slope. Both of them will intersect at the equilibrium point. The price there is $5, and you can show that the equilibrium quantity, let's say, is QM. Okay, so similarly you can draw it side by side for the farmer Labo as well. Part B says, believing that the incomes of potato farmers are unfairly low, the government of Gratin imposes a binding price floor at $7 per sack. The government will purchase any surpluses of potatoes. So on your graph in part A, show each of the following. Again, you see, you will have to draw this graph corresponding to the condition given that the government will impose a binding price floor. So introducing a price floor on the graph is what you would be required to do here. And that again is a question where you will have to draw that horizontal line of price floor, and accordingly you will show the changes in supply, etc., on the graph. Okay, then part C, it says if the absolute value of price elasticity of demand is 0.92, would consumer spending on potatoes increase, decrease, stay the same? So within the same question, they are now also bringing in the concept of elasticity. So you have to analyze the given condition, the percentage increase in price, for example, would it outweigh the percentage decrease in the quantity demanded of the potatoes, etc. That kind of analysis you would have to write it down, and you get just 1 point for writing that answer. D part, it says how would the price floor affect the demand for labor? So effect of floor is the basic concept that they are asking. So obviously you have to state that demand for labor will increase or the demand curve will shift towards the right. Okay, similarly part E, it says potatoes, corn and rice are all produced on the island of Gratin in perfectly competitive markets. Again, assume corn is a substitute. So now they are moving to the theory of substitutes and complements, right? So part 1, they are saying that how would setting the price floor on potatoes affect the equilibrium price? Similarly, part 2, they are saying as a result of increase in price of rice, the demand of potatoes increase. So are rice and potatoes substitutes or complements? So basically we know that from the consumption theory, we know that they are substitutes. So every single answer that you write, you will get 1.2 points, 1.2 points. So overall, in a 10-point question, you can see the 10 points are divided over at least 5 to 6 questions, and each question has 1.2 point, 1.2 point marking scheme. So if you have to get, let's say, 8-9 points out of the 10 points here, you will have to answer at least 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5 questions correctly, and that will enable you to get a good score on the free response question as well. Remember, the weightage of MCQ versus FRQ is 66% versus 34%. It's like 2/3 and 1/3. So a higher weightage is there for the MCQs. And I have already pointed out the bigger challenge with the MCQs is that the time constraint is severe there. You have to answer 60 questions within 70 minutes. So you have to move really quick. Okay, now talking about what are the scores that will help you get, let's say, a 5 on this test. Okay, so ideally, out of the 60 MCQs, let's say if I say that each MCQ is 1 mark, let's say you have 66 marks approximately for those 60 questions. So you must be scoring at least 45 on the MCQ section. Similarly, out of the 34 marks that you have for FRQ, okay, again, you must be scoring at least 20 marks on the FRQ section as well. That will enable you to score overall something in the range 65 plus or maybe 70 plus. So getting 70 plus as a raw score will definitely help you secure a grade 5 on this test. Now, as I have already mentioned, the kind of preparation required for the MCQs is a little different from the kind of preparation for the free response questions. So proportionately a higher percentage of marks are scored through the MCQs. So accordingly, you have to prepare more for the multiple choice questions rather than the free response questions for this particular AP test. Okay, these are the important parts of your preparation. You need to understand the microeconomic concepts. As I was sharing those questions with you, you would have noticed most of the questions, they only check the fundamental knowledge, conceptual knowledge, mostly based on the graphs. So all the graphs, all the concepts must be 100% crystal clear in your head so that you are able to answer those questions. You have to practice extensively for the MCQs and FRQs. So ideally, you should be taking at least 10 to 15 mock tests. You must be solving, let's say, around 50 to 100 multiple choice type questions for each of these units that we discussed are a part of your syllabus. So there are 5 units. So you need extensive MCQ and FRQ practice to get a good grade on this test. Okay, this I've already said is a relatively high scoring AP. So if you miss out on certain number of questions, the chances are that you won't be able to score a 5. Okay, so to score a 5, you really need to be scoring high here, more than 70%. You need to familiarize yourself with the examination pattern. As I said, managing time is one of the key strategies for this particular test as far as the multiple choice questions are concerned. Utilizing your resources like the calculator usage, online practice, different books, materials, etc., that would also play a major role as far as getting good grades are concerned. Okay, so I am now open to take up all the questions. You may type your questions in the box, or you may feel comfortable. You can ask all your questions. So if you have any queries, please do shoot, write your queries. Okay, there is one question. Can you talk about some resources which the students can use? Well, there are plenty of online resources available. Okay, and there are a lot of books available as well. Okay, so even if you just go to Google, type AP microeconomics, a whole lot of websites would just open up. So online resources are fine, but a strong recommendation would be that please use some standard texts as well. Okay, using standard texts is very, very important for this particular AP, because as you saw, the questions are more conceptual in nature. So I would strongly recommend using some good textbooks. For example, a textbook by Samuelson, or textbook by Mankiv are some of the good books or good resources that I would recommend for this particular AP. Okay. Do we have other queries? Okay. If you are doing IBHL economics, can you do AP? Yes, of course. Of course. Okay. In fact, you would be at a great advantage because you're already doing the fundamental concepts as part of your core IBHL curriculum. So in fact, I would strongly recommend you taking this AP, because you'd find it very much in tune with your syllabus of IBHL economics. Yes. So yes, you can. The second part of that question is, should you? Yes, I think I've answered that as well. You should. See, end of the day, you need some credits. Okay. In fact, I would say that for you, this would be easy credits going on for your admission in the States. So I would recommend you taking this particular AP. All right. So if we don't have any further question, I would like to hand it over to Kanushri here. She can take it over from here. Over to you, Kanushri.
Thank you so much for a wonderful session, Harsh. We host unique AP, SAT, and IBDB masterclasses every weekend, and we'll be sending out email updates to keep you informed. Before we wrap up, I'd also like to take a moment to display our students' AP results. It's truly inspiring to see their hard work and commitment reflected in these scores. That brings us to the close of today's session. I'm going to share a few important links. Please feel free to save them for your reference. And we look forward to welcoming you all to our upcoming events and masterclasses. All right. So we look forward to welcoming you to our upcoming events and masterclasses. And thank you so much once again for joining us today. Until next time, take care and keep learning.